Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Dear students, Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the course of Academic Reading and Writing. The topic of today's lecture is 5 levels of close reading. I'm your teacher, Muhammad Asif Khan, lecturer, Department of English, Cohort University of Science and Technology. Discussion agenda for this class is that I will start my lecture with a question that what is close reading? And after discussing this question that how close reading is different from unproductive or passive reading, and how we can make our reading active and how we can do close reading. Then we will move towards the main area of our today's lecture, and that is 5 levels of close reading. And we will see that how these 5 levels help a reader to analyze a text and discern some deeper meanings that are presented in that very text that we are reading. The first level of close reading is paraphrasing. Then we will move towards the second level, that is explicating or explaining the thesis of a paragraph. After that, we will move towards the third level, and in third level, we will study that how we can analyze the logic of what we are reading. The fourth level of close reading is evaluation, and in this level, we will see that how we can assign the logic of what we are reading. And the last level or the fifth level of close reading is role playing. And in this stage, we will see that a reader can speak in the voice of an author, and in this way he can get that level of understanding through which we can discern the meanings of a given piece of text. So let's start with the question, what is close reading? If we learn to read without understanding what good reading involves, so it means that we are reading poorly. That is why we see that reading is most of the time passive activity for most of the students. And many students, they are taking it as a pastime. Even if they are studying the course books, they are reading that very material passively. So it is as if their theory of reading was something like this, that you let your eye move from left to right, scan one line at a time, until somehow in some inexplicable way, meanings automatically and effortlessly happen in the mind of the reader. So this type of perception about reading, that you just go through the lines and without any effort you automatically get the meanings of a text, it is near to impossible. And because of this theory of reading, we see that most of the students are passively interacting with, or they are passively involved in the process of reading. And when you are passively doing the activity of reading, it means that you are reading without understanding. So this is an unproductive view of reading. If we want to get beyond this unproductive view of reading, we must recognize this very thing, that the work of reading, and especially the work of close reading, consists in mindfully extracting and internalizing the important meanings that are there in the text. So we have to do reading as a productive activity. We have to read actively, and more than that, we have to read closely, and we have to consider reading as a highly constructive activity. We see that the reflective mind works its way into the mind of an author through that intellectual discipline, and he find out the exact meanings which the author wants to convey to his readers. And how we can do that very thing, how we can reach that mind which has created that piece of writing, that is through the process of close reading. There are a number of ways, there are a number of styles, there are a number of levels of close reading, but the close reading process we will follow in this very lecture, that is based on 5 levels. But before going into those 5 levels, I will define the term close reading. Basically, close reading is a method of analysis. And what we are analyzing in close reading? We are analyzing a piece of text. And in this analysis, we focus on the specific details of a passage or a text, and that very thing is being done in order to discern some deeper meanings that are present in that piece of text. So the meaning that are derived from close reading is the reader's interpretation of the passage of the text, and we are not saying that whatever we get as a result of close reading, that is actually the wholly solely product of the ideas of the writer. Actually, there is a great role of defining the meanings of that piece of text by the reader. So reader has a great role in defining that text when we are close reading any piece of text. So now let's move towards the levels, and we see that here we are highlighting 5 levels or 5 degrees of close reading, and we see that the reflective reader does not always use all of them, which I am explaining here. A reflective reader, he chooses from these very stages or these methods which we are defining here, which we are explaining here, and he do these practices according to the purpose of his reading. So it depends upon the reflective reader that which of the level he chooses for his close reading. But these are the 5 levels which I am expressing here, and these 5 levels will help you not only in getting the closer view of any piece of text, it will also help you to accommodate other strategies which are being used by the close readers when they are reading any text closely. So the first step is paraphrasing. Paraphrasing the text sentence by sentence and stating the words of the author in your own words is called paraphrasing. Or we can also define paraphrasing as formulating someone else's ideas in one's own words. For example, if we read a piece of text, we just get the main ideas that are there in that material, and afterward we just write down those ideas in our own words. So that is paraphrasing. Or paraphrasing is a restatement of a text or a passage or a work, giving the meanings in another form. Actually, when the writer is paraphrasing a piece of text, he does not go away from the actual meanings that are defined there in that text. He tries to restate the passage or the words or the ideas that are being written on a page of book or any piece of writing that is there. So to paraphrase a source, you have to rewrite a passage without changing the meaning of the original text. We are not trying to change the meanings, or we are not trying to add any other information to that very piece of text. When we are paraphrasing, we just rewrite that passage but in our own words. So that is the first stage of close reading, that you read a passage, you read a text, or you read a work, and you restate that very passage, that very text or work into your own words. So that is the first stage. Then the second level of close reading is explicating. And from explicating, I mean that you explain the thesis or the argument of that paragraph or that passage or that text or that work. So state the main point of the paragraph or a passage or a text in 1 or 2 sentences. Here you have to explain the argument of that very paragraph which you have read. And the first step of explicating is that you state the main idea or main point of any piece of literature that you are explicating. And the second step is that you elaborate the ideas you have paraphrased in the first step. Here you are adding your own point of view about that piece of text which you are explicating. So in the first step, we just paraphrase the ideas, and paraphrasing is restating the ideas. Whereas in the second level of close reading, we explain and we elaborate the ideas which we have paraphrased in the first step. Or you can start elaborating in this way, that in other words, we can narrate the same ideas in this way. And the third step of explicating is that you give examples of the meanings, and you do this by tying it to concrete situations in the real world. So you are giving examples from the real world, and you are just tying it down to the concrete situations. What you are reading in the text, you are giving it or you are connecting it with the real situation and with the real world. And you can start this with the phrases like, for example. So in the first step, we stated the main idea, then we elaborated the paraphrase ideas, and in the third step, we have to give concrete examples from the real world situations. And the fourth step is to generate metaphors, to generate analogies, to generate pictures or diagrams of the basic thesis or the main argument of any paragraph or any passage or any piece of text. And when we generate these metaphors, analogies, pictures or diagrams of basic thesis, we are basically connecting it to other meanings which we are already having in our mind, which we understand, or meanings of those very ideas or concepts are clear to us. So with the metaphorical or analogical connections, we get more closer connection with the argument or the thesis of that piece of writing. So the second step is explicating. The first step is paraphrasing or restating the ideas that are there in the text. In the second level of the close reading, we explicate the thesis or the argument. And I have given you 4 steps. The first is to state the main point. The second step is to elaborate the paraphrased ideas, and this paraphrasing which we have done in the first step. Then we have to give examples from the real world. And in the fourth step, we generate metaphors and analogies. And in this way, we connect with those ideas which are already there in our mind. Now let's move towards the third level. And we see that in the third level, we analyze the logic of what we are reading. Anytime when we read, we are reading the product of author's reasoning. So the piece of writing which is before us, that is basically the product of author's reasoning, or author is explaining something, or an author is presenting his argument or thesis. So when we are reading the product of an author's mind. So to bring our reading to a higher level, or to get the closer view of that very piece of text, we can use our understanding of the elements of reasoning. First of all, I will explain the concept of elements of reasoning. So dear students, the parts or the elements of thinking or reasoning are following. We see that all the reasoning has a purpose. Whenever we are reasoning, We do it for some purpose. And the second part or the element of reasoning is that all reasoning is an attempt to figure something out, or to settle some question, or to solve some problem. So when we are reasoning, we are trying to figure out or settle down or solve some issue or some problem. And we see that all reasoning is based on assumptions, and all reasoning is done from some point of view. When we are reasoning, so you reason either for that or either against that. These are two point of views, but we can have many point of views for supporting or for going against an assumption. So there are many point of views, and when we are reasoning from some point of view. And we see that reasoning is based on data, information, and evidence. And all reasoning is expressed through concepts and ideas. And another feature or another element of thinking or reasoning is that all reasoning contains inferences and interpretations by which we draw conclusions and give meaning to the data or the information that is being provided to us. And the last part or element of reasoning is that all reasoning leads somewhere or has implications and consequences. When we are reasoning, actually we are moving towards the solution, or we are moving towards the settlement, or we are moving towards implication and consequences. So analyzing the logic of what we are reading, that is another level of close reading. If we are not able to analyze the logic, that is basically the analysis and appraisal of the argument. It means that we are unable to understand that why the author has written that very text. We already covered that how we can discuss the author's purpose. So I'm not explaining the author's purpose here, because we already did a video lecture on author's purpose and the reader's purpose. So here we are explaining the third level of close reading, and that is analysis. And we see that analyzing the logic of what we are reading is the third step of close reading. And in this step we discussed that how we can understand the elements of reason by analyzing the logic of what we are reading. And in this step we see that how elements of reasoning helps us to analyze the logic of what we are reading. Now we see that by asking a few questions we can analyze the logic of what we are reading. These questions are like, what is the author's fundamental purpose in this very writing? Or what is the author's point of view with respect to this issue? If you will discuss this very question, it will give you the closer understanding of that piece of writing. Another question that is being asked by the close reader, and that is that what assumption is the author making in his or her reasoning, and what are the implications of author's reasoning. So what information does the author uses in reasoning through this issue is another question which we can use when we are close reading or when we are analyzing a piece of text. Another question is that what are the most fundamental inferences or conclusions in this very article, or what are the author's most basic concepts in this piece of writing. Or we can also ask a question about a piece of writing, that what is the key question that author is trying to answer in this very piece of writing. So you can do this by asking the following questions. We can analyze a piece of writing closely by asking the following questions, which I have just narrated in front of you. So you may ask these questions in any order you want. There is no restriction that you have to ask these questions in this very sequence which I have written here. But when you ask these questions about a piece of writing, actually you are analyzing that very piece of writing, and in this way you are doing close reading of a piece of text. So the highlighted words are actually the elements of reasoning which I have explained to you in the last slide. So when you ask these questions, you are analyzing the logic of what we are reading. This is the third level of close reading. Now let's move towards the fourth level of close reading, and that is evaluation. Or we can also name it as assessing the logic of what we are reading. Every written piece is not of the same quality. We see that whenever you read a piece of writing, quality always differ. We assess what we read by applying some intellectual standards to it. How do we evaluate this very thing, that this piece of writing is different from the other piece of writing? We do it by applying intellectual standards. And these standards are clarity, precision, accuracy, relevance, significance, depth, breadth, logic, and fairness. You see that there will be a lot of difference in use of these very standards by different writers, and on the basis of these differences we can make the difference between the standard and the quality of different written pieces. We see that some authors, they adhere to some of the standards while they violate others. For example, you will see that an author might be clear in stating his or her position, while at the same time using information that is not accurate. So this could happen within a same piece of text, that you see that author is very clear in stating his position, but the information which he is using, that might not be correct. Or there will be a writer that might use very relevant information, but he failed to think through the complexities of the issues. He is not having that depth in his reasoning, or he is not having that depth in the understanding of that very problem. He is providing relevant information, but he is lacking the depth. In the same way, an author's argument might be logical, but he might not be presenting very significant ideas. Some authors, we see that they just adhere to some of the standards which I have given you in this very slide, but we see that it is not possible that one single writer, he just achieve or he just apply all the standards that I have listed here. Sometimes he is using one while he is violating others. So as a reader, then we need to become skilled and adapt at assessing the quality of an author's reasoning. So we do this only after we can accurately state in our own words and author meanings. So if we get that very skill, that we have the ability to assess the quality of author's reasoning, or we have the ability to judge the intellectual standards of a good writing, then it becomes very easy to judge any piece of writing. And in this way we can evaluate that what are the author's reasoning, and how he has presented his logic, and how he has presented his ideas, and how he has reasoned in this very text. So assessing the logic of what we are reading, that is the fourth level. And we see that in this level we evaluate a piece of writing. And we see that every written piece is not of the same quality. And we apply intellectual standards. And these standards are clarity, precision, accuracy, relevance, significance, depth, breadth, logic, and fairness. These are some of the principles which I have referred here. There are many others. But if you master, or if you get skill at assessing the quality of these very intellectual standards, it will be very easy to assess the logic of what we are reading. So that is the fourth level. Further to this, when we assess an author's work, we have to get the answer of the following questions. The first question is, does the author clearly state his or her meanings? Or is the text vague, confused, or muddled in some way? So in this way, we can evaluate the author's work, and we assess the author's work, that whether he is clear or he is just confused and vague. Is the author accurate in what he or she claims? This is another question. Or we can question that, is the author is sufficiently precise in providing details and specifics, and whether the specifics are relevant or not? We can question about the piece of writing, that does the author introduce irrelevant material, and in this way he is just going away from his or her purpose? That is again a very important question. And if we get the answers of these questions, what we are doing? We are assessing or evaluating that very piece of writing. So getting the answers of these questions are very important, and it will automatically help you in the evaluation and in the assessment of the author's work. Some other questions are also there, like, does the author take us into the important complexities inherent in that subject? Or is the writing superficial? Or he is just presenting us that outer layer of the argument that is available about that very subject. For example, if the writer is introducing the complexities of that subject, then you will automatically see that your understanding of that knowledge domain will automatically improve. Another question might be like that, does the author consider other relevant point of views, or is the writing overly narrow in its perspective? So if you have the understanding of the point of view, that is one of the element of reasoning, it means that you can evaluate whether the perspective of the writer is narrow or broad. So in this way we can judge the intellectual standard of assessing or evaluating a piece of writing, and that is that what is the depth or breadth of this very piece of text. So we can ask questions like, is the text internally consistent, or does the text contain unexplained contradictions? Consistency in the ideas and consistency in the expression, both of these things are very important. If a piece of text is internally consistent, and we see that the ideas that are presented, they are not having any contradictions, so you will see that it will present a very good view on any of the subject which is under discussion in that very text. Another question that we can have about the text is that, is the text significant, or is the subject dealt with in a trivial manner? So judging the significance of the text is again one of the important responsibility of the close reader. And if a reader sees this very thing, that the writer is not dealing the subject in the right way, and the subject is dealt in a very trivial manner, and we see that the writer is missing the significant ideas about that topic, so it means that the text is not reasoning, or the author is not reasoning in the proper way. Another question might be that, does the author display fairness, or does the author take one-sided narrow approach? Biases and prejudice within a piece of writing also make it a bad piece of writing. So discussing all these things and assessing all these questions are very important in close reading. Now let's move towards the final level of close reading, and that is role playing. We see that in this level, speaking in the voice of an author, that is being done by the reader. So role playing an author is the last or the ultimate test of understanding. And when we role play, in essence, we are saying that, look, I will enter the mind of the author and speak as if I were the author. So you are speaking on behalf of the author. And it means that you claim that now I am having a good understanding of that text, and I will be able to discuss any question you may have about the text. So by adopting the voice of the author and by assuming the role of the author, the reader will answer, and he will answer these questions thinking as if he is the author of this very text. So reader will speak in first person singular, and he will be like actor that is playing the part of the Hamlet, or he will try to be author fully and truly for the purpose of this very exercise. And we see that to role play an author, we need a partner who has already read that very piece of text, and he is willing to ask questions about that piece of text. When the close reader will respond to the questions, we see that it will force the reader to think within the author's logic. And practicing talking within the voice of an author is a very good way to get a personal sense of whether we have really absorbed the core meanings of that very text or not. So if you want to get the real meaning or real understanding of that very text, the last step of close reading is role playing, and you have to play like an author, and one of your friend or partner will help you by asking questions, and it is necessary that that person has also read that very text and he asks the relevant questions from you. And in this way, when you will respond to the questions, you will think within the author's logic, and in this way we can judge this very thing, that whether we have absorbed the core ideas of the text or not. So today's topic was about close reading, and we see that close reading is a method of analysis of the text, which basically focuses on the specific details of a passage or a text. And the close reading is being done in order to discern some deeper meanings that are presented in the piece of the text. So close reading is a method of analysis in which we are trying to understand the text, but that understanding is for the understanding of the deeper meanings. So thank you very much for your time, and I hope that now you will be clear about the concept of close reading, and I have given you some of the levels of close reading, but it is not necessary for a reflective reader to follow all of these steps, and these are not the only steps you can include, because reflective reader, he chooses from the different techniques which are being used by the close readers, and his selection is based on the purpose of his reading. So thank you very much for listening. Allah Hafiz.